Welcome, everybody, to Beyond the Booth, Skyline Exhibit's brand new podcast. The point of this podcast is kind of pull the curtain back on the exhibit industry, make you feel like you're in the room with a group of industry professionals where we tackle different subjects. This week, I'm joined by Andrea Murphy, who heads up Skyline's digital team, and Chris Takas, our business development director. Andrea, if you would, just introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi. This is so exciting. I'm glad to be part of the first episode here. And yeah, I've been with Skyline for about 7 months. And like you said, I head up the digital team, and any project that has a digital element, my team is involved getting the right vendors, activation, and creative ideas going.
Excellent. And Chris?
Yeah, my name's Chris Takas. I'm happy to be here as well, fresh off the show floor at CES, obviously, as we go into that season. I've been blessed to work for Skyline for a short time now, but I've been in the industry for quite a while. I've worked on the digital side, the activation side, the experiential side. So it might be new with Skyline, but not new to the industry.
Amazing. And let me introduce myself. I'm your host, Brian Lanning. I'm a senior managing director here at Skyline. I've been with Skyline since 2005, been in the industry since 1997. You can tell by the gray in my beard that I've been around for quite some time. As Chris sort of mentioned, we're going to start talking about CES. Now, CES, if you do not know or have been living underneath a rock, is one of the biggest trade shows on the planet. It's kind of like Fashion Week for electronics. It's some key statistics surrounding CES. CES has over 140,000 attendees from over 150 countries. The show itself takes place in over 12 venues in Las Vegas on 3 main campuses, has over 2.5 million square feet of exhibit space and over 4,500 exhibitors that come up to show their wares. Now, we're going to start off in breaking down some of the key takeaways that my 2 industry professionals brought back surrounding digital integration, what was new and different this year, what some of those standout trends, good and bad, and some of the stuff that kind of drove attendee engagement. So first off, what were some of the things that impressed you the most about the show? Andrea, do you want to start us off?
Well, I quickly just wanted to set the scene. So this is my very first CES. So everything was very new, fresh, exciting for me. Traveled with 2 other coworkers. There was another Chris. So he and we arrived to CES together. We took the train over there and we had to wait a few because they were packed like sardines. And we had to eventually kind of shove our way in and shove our way out once we got to the convention center. And the second that we stepped out, there were lines just in the parking lot, crammed, people waiting to get in because we got there right at show open. We were going to meet this Chris here in one of the halls, but it was lively. People were ready to bust down the doors to get in. And yeah, I mean, I have, of course, like a different perspective being my very first show. When we walked into, was it the West Hall that we walked into first together, Chris? Yeah. And
we met in the West Hall lobby for sure.
Yeah, and I think for me, like I said, everything was new, but you immediately spotted a couple booths that were from some of the bigger names where it was almost identical to the years prior. And those were some of the things that you could identify just immediately.
Yeah, I would say that having been fortunate to attend CES for many, many years, I saw a lot of the repeats from last year and the year before, which is somewhat normal, but it was definitely a little more prevalent this year. There was a lot of repeats, same basic footprint, same basic configurations, designs, utilization. So there was a lot of the same for sure.
Mm-hmm. And then we did get
surprising. Oh, I know. I was going to say that's kind of surprising to me because CES is normally where people roll out or put their best foot forward. Do you think that maybe the economic trends this year or the last year had something to do with that?
I think, Brian, that could open a whole nother podcast for us to do, but I think it did have some elements in that for sure. I think that there's a lot of, political uncertainty and people are a little uncomfortable and they're not sure about the economy. So I feel like that was definitely a contributing factor for sure. And I think a lot of brands are gonna revisit that conversation this year and look at showing up next year as well.
Yeah. Well, I look at the percentage of international exhibitors that were taking place there as well. And I kind of think that may have had something to do with it. And Andrea, you had to have a fresh perspective as well, coming from your television background, right? So not only did you come in with sort of looking at it from a trade show, a new trade show perspective, but also from a production background. How did that affect the way you actually saw some of the exhibits and some of the production value?
Yeah, so coming from a television production background of any sort, I know how much it takes to go from concept to completion and how much time is between. It can be a very tight turnaround, even when you have months and months or years to plan. And you can really see the value or in the money that people put in and the care that they put in when everything does go live. You can see the quality. So I was able to really appreciate some of the booths that really took their, they found their booth, they found whatever that may be, like a theme or a product that they were really going to have as their standout showstopper. And you could tell that they dedicated their booth and their content specifically around that. And so you could see from, way across the hall, what that brand was and maybe what they were highlighting. So that's what I was really looking for, to see where my eyes were drawn to, whether that be like color, what type of content, what was standing out, whether that was, up above in the eyesight or, the moment that I was walking past. Those are the things that I was really looking for and how people really utilized an LED wall, because you're seeing LED walls left, right, center, using them everywhere. And now we have to be creative. And how are we going to stand apart from the competitors? Or just, if we are going to redo the same booth over and over again, how are we going to find content that's going to actually stop people to come in rather than say, oh, nothing new here. So that's what I was really looking for. There were a couple different activations that we can jump into in a bit about what really grabbed my attention, and then some that I just passed right by.
Let's focus a little bit before we get into the activations, because I really want to dive into that, because we talk about it a lot with some of our clients, that content is king, and defining your persona and creating a journey is really the way to go. But let's talk about, because it is CES and it is all about the electronics. What sort of what electronics or technology actually stood out to you, Chris, as sort of being shining stars?
Yeah, I think it was obviously the integration of AI into everything from toasters to air fryers to vacuums to, they had vacuums that could climb ladders and stairs. They had vacuums that can move things from within in front of itself. I feel like the integration of all that into our daily lives and our homes is becoming much, much more realistic and becoming much more practical as well and more attainable. Those are some of the big things that jumped out. Obviously, I noticed a major decline in the EV footprints. There was a lot of EVs in the past and EV-focused brands, companies that support the EV industry. There was a lot less of that this year than in past. In fact, I don't think I saw very many EV charging companies set up this year, as opposed to the past. So I think there's been a little bit of a trend. It was definitely software focused and AI focused and humanoid focused this year.
What did you think about all the robots, though? Because I've never been around that many robots in my life. I feel like there were certain halls where you would see those humanoids, you'd see the robots. And I, again, wasn't there for the perspective of checking out the electronics. So, I was trying to see what was grabbing my attention and the content or the demonstrations. But yeah, how do you feel about robots and potentially taking over our lives? That's, that's kind of the conversation that was kind of being had in certain halls.
For sure. I think there's a big shift, and I think they did a good job this year of humanizing those humanoids, as we're going to call them, making them acceptable to make failures. There were many situations where one would fall over or it would make a mistake in the activity, and it became acceptable and part of the learning process, so to speak, almost like they were children and it was acceptable to learn and make mistakes. That humanizing it, right? Making it feel more of a part of our life rather than this fearful replacement thing that everybody's been preaching and scared about. So I think it was much, much more human approach to it. There was more involvement where they were becoming co-partners on the stage. They weren't the forefront. They were integrating them into human activities that were working side by side with humans. So I think they did a good job of humanizing that interaction, and it didn't feel like, here comes the Terminators, basically, right? It was a very, very like, oh, I could see this thing folding my laundry for me and making my dinner and picking up my groceries for me while I sit on the couch and watch YouTube. So I think they did a really good job of that. And it was definitely a more focal point. Like we had robots playing ping pong with each other. We had a boxing one, which was one of my favorite ones, where they actually had humans boxing robots, which was a really cool thing. So I just think they did a good job of integrating the more human side of that in and kind of downplaying the stigma that's been circling the media lately.
Yeah, I think it's great when they do things like that, allowing you to see the future potential of what that could be, along with the AI. Now, does every toaster need to have artificial intelligence into it? I'm not quite sure about all of that just yet. But I can see where it's going. Like I see the future of the application. And I love the fact that there's people out there taking those kind of risks. But at the same time, this kind of leads me to something that we kind of talked about pre-show, is that AI seemed to be everywhere, right? Like AI was in everything, and we're seeing it on our side too in a number of discoveries and RFPs. Is that AI companies seem to be coming out of the woodwork. Everyone is the next big thing. Talk to me about what you saw on the trade show floor that kind of led you to believe that maybe that's not the case, right? That AI could be the next big thing, but my feeling is, and I felt this well before CES, is that being old enough to have lived through the dot-com era when a ton of dot-com companies rolled out, and I was picking up the phone and people were calling me going, we're the next big thing. We've got a 40 by 40 at this show. And, you need to give us big discounts and because we're going to explode and you basically be investing us for the future. And finding out that everyone's not going to be that big hit. Everyone's not going to be hitting that home run. How did that translate to the show floor at CES this year?
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Brian. I think that brands forget sometimes that showing up and having the appearance of your brand reputation represented properly is a key component to that. It's hard for someone to take you serious if you say that, I'm the next OpenAI, or I'm the next Microsoft, or I'm the next this, when your brand isn't represented well on the show floor. You kind of show up with some banner stands and a banner that's Velcroed to a wall, and you've got power cords hanging out. It's that attention to detail that brand reputation, I think, sometimes fell very short this year. And I get the startup culture, and there's a cool factor in being a startup company and working on folding tables and chairs. But this is the biggest stage in the world, and where you're showing up to represent that and to put your best foot forward. The best analogy I could come up with when I was trying to figure out how I would present that portion of this is, it comes back to like going to a job interview, right? Like you could be the best at what you do, but if you show up in a t-shirt and jeans, no one's going to take you serious. Right. And I felt like a lot of brands this year showed up in t-shirt and jeans, and they didn't take that part serious. And I think that it showed. And I think those brands will see lost value in their brand perception as a result of that. There were brands that I personally use, and I felt that they didn't show up in a way that truly represented how they actually function as a company and how polished they are and how well their software works. And their brand reputation was damaged as a result of not showing up with a trusted partner to help them actually execute a flawless plan.
Mm-hmm. And for me, again, not someone who knows all the details about what those AI technologies do for the company, I'm looking at it through a different lens. But when, we did talk to a couple booths where, could maybe use a little bit more help from our department, right? But I mean, they had some really amazing tools. They had a really great program, whatever that may be, but their booth, even in a 10 by 10, they weren't even using the entire space, or, you could see people were just passing by because they weren't being taken seriously. And even just changing like the layout of the footprint, making it a little bit more welcoming or a little bit more brand recognition, something that is a little bit more polished, I think could drive more more traffic to these booths. It was, some people it was hard to stand out, and the reason that we engaged is maybe from that other perspective, because we want to help people who have really great, amazing products and be able to gain that traction that they're looking for at these huge shows where they have a lot of eyes.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree with that. There were several brands that were there that had really, really cool products, humanoids that were really, really cutting edge, that were human-like, that had facial expressions, that were super customizable, but we walked by them 3 times because they didn't really have anything to jump out or to draw people's attention. And I think there were a lot of missed opportunities on the floor as a result of that.
There's a lot of messaging that needs to happen to say, this is why I'm different, whether it's, if they're not a known AI brand or whatever that may be, how do we say I'm different and this is what my product is in just that small footprint? So I think
absolutely.
there were some that did a really fantastic job. And again, some that were just walked by without a glance, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned small footprint because again, in some of the pre-conversations that we were having is we started talking about, and I'm not sure why companies do this when they go and they purchase large footprints, right? They're in a 40 by 60 or a 40 by 40 space, and then they end up with very small budgets as it pertains to the structures or the messaging or the theme or the graphics that they're going to have to place inside that square footage. And it ends up stretching them so thin that they don't have room for the theming and the storytelling or the type of quality that a high-end brand that needs to stand out on a show floor like CES demands in order to make impact. And that was one of the things that really stood out to me was, and has for quite some time, when you get a booth that is obviously underfunded. And for us, it's the recommendation we would always make is you don't need to be in that big a booth space, right? There's absolutely no reason for you to buy that big a booth space because quite frankly, you're doing yourself a disservice, right? Like condense the booth space, tell a better story, tell a more cohesive story, spend the money on something, on the engagement, on the theming, on the attendee journey, where the folks will feel engaged with your product, be able to engage through your brand as opposed to kind of trying to figure out what the disjointed message is in this large footprint. Because quite frankly, no one cares how big your footprint is, right? People care how engaging and what the story is and what the theme is and how it attracts them and how it speaks to them.
Yeah, there was one specifically, Chris, I don't know if I was with you on this day, but there was one where the booth journey was a bit of a mess. I was getting lost in there because they had a couple different LED installations throughout the booth. I thought they did a great job of showcasing with product. They had a air filtration or what is it called, where I can't remember what that type of system is called, where, they had it mounted to the wall, but they also had LED that was set into the wall and they used content to make it flow and show how like the air pathways worked and, the benefits from that product. And then there was a couple other different really cool installations that I was in a way wowed with, but I was like, wait, am I in the same booth? Is this the same brand? What's happening? And I was in the same booth, but it just didn't feel super cohesive. And then also booth staff, it didn't feel very engaged. While it was a bit of a maze in these different areas where they were highlighting different products, it didn't feel like, they were really maximizing the people walking through there and getting lost, being able, say you go in, it's like to IKEA where you're going in for one thing and you have to go through the whole maze and you end up buying a whole bunch of other things you never thought. But, utilizing that where, someone's in there and just having someone engage. I didn't see the booth staff fully taking that on, if that was their goal to get people lost in there. But again, some really great use of LED from my perspective, but a miss in some other areas.
Yeah, I would agree. There was a lot of opportunity for the booth staff to definitely level up a little bit this year. There were many times that I walked in and would have a conversation with someone, explain to me what your objective is, what is your product, and I got deer in headlights. And I even got told a few times that, I'm sorry, I don't work for the company, and I just grabbed your business card or scan your badge. and I'll get you some information sent out. And it was almost like a lead capture mindset, which again is why show up and spend all this money if you're not going to capitalize on the largest stage in the world at this point, right? Like everybody and anybody is there to learn and see and build relationships and partnerships. And why would you miss those opportunities and spend all that money and affect your ROI?
I mean, humanoids, AI, LED technology, they're all great, right? But if those sold your products, you would be able to set those up and walk away, right? Yep. You would never have to staff your booth. But when you talk about the Center for Exhibit Industry Research and you look at those statistics, what people remember most is the engagement with your staff, right? That's what they remember most. So, and a lot of that goes unnoticed by marketers, and we preach it, of course. But a lot of times it's the choices are made where it's the top salesperson gets to go, right? And those top salespeople, more than likely, they're not the hungriest, right? Those are the people that are well fed. They're coming to take their best clients to dinner, or they're I've been working for the company for 3 months. They don't even know the mission statement. They have no idea what the company is all about, or specifically why we're at this specific show or what we're trying to accomplish there. So that's a huge miss. It's a huge miss. But that goes back into the journey. Andrea, you mentioned IKEA. I think that's a great example of having an attendee journey, because you walk into an IKEA and you try to get out of an IKEA, you have to walk through all of their venues, all of their little kiosks to make your way to an exit, right? And probably have to have meatballs on your way out. Like that, you have no choice. I think it's mandatory, actually. But that's a great example of how to map out what you need to see and how you need to flow inside a space or in spatial relations. Designing a theme or designing an exhibit journey should be core to what you're doing, and then add technology. Because one of the things we preach all the time is that technology for technology's sake is absolutely useless. It's a useless spend. Content is king. I can't tell you the amount of times we've been in conversations where someone says, I want to have a huge LED wall. And we go, that's great. What are you going to put on it? And they're like, we're not quite sure. I think we have the sizzle reel. We have a sizzle reel that we're going to put up there. And we're like, oh, when was that produced? Oh, we're going to have to look. I think it's on VHS. So, those are the type of things that you have to take a look at, because content being king, it's the message, it's the theme that makes the difference. When you get the symbiotic combination of technology, theming, journey that matches and aligns with your KPIs, and you can get metrics back from it, and aligns with the personas and the demographics you're trying to reach, like that's when you're doing something right on the show floor, whether it's CES or whether it's any show, really.
And Brian, you mentioned a fact to me in a prior meeting where you said you have X amount of seconds, like as someone walks by, to grab their attention. And that's just so important. And, yes, bigger footprint booths that have a couple more seconds than, the smaller 10 by 10, 10 by 20. But with that, I mean,
it's for every, the metric is for every 10 feet, you have 3 seconds at a normal walking pace. So you have 3 seconds to grab someone's attention, and you're competing with, and we base this on like a 10-foot exhibit. So if I'm walking through down an aisle and you're in an inline space, I have to make an impression in 3 seconds, and I'm dealing with whatever's going on in the attendee's head, whatever's going on in front of them, whatever's down the aisle, whatever's going on in the air, whatever's going on in the show. So I have to make an impression, get someone, and all I'm looking for, and I say this all the time, all I'm looking for is someone to do this. If I can get someone to stop and do this and take a second look, if someone who's working inside the booth should be able to notice that, recognize that, and be able to ask an open-ended question right away. That's what they should be seeing, and that's what they should be going after. You're talking about the booth space. Now you have a little bit more time with the islands, right? Because you have a lot more space along the aisle. But again, you're just looking for someone to stop, turn their head, and start to gain some interest. in what's happening, or relate to what's happening. Like, hey, I'm in that industry, or hey, I'm interested in that, or I'm working with someone who does something like that, and find their way in. And that alone should be something that allows someone who's working the booth to engage in a conversation.
Right.
It goes back to something that Chris pointed out in some of our pre-conversations is now you used to be able to the days of rolling trade shows and just creating cool exhibits is over, right? Trade show structure isn't going to do it for you anymore, right? You can create all the cool structure you want. These exhibits have to tell a story and they have to be immersive. You have to be able to immerse someone into your brand and be able to tell that story. Can you guys think of any really cool examples from CES where you sort of felt surrounded or immersed inside a brand?
Yeah, I would say there was, I'll go ahead and jump in, Andrea, sorry. I would say there's been a couple of obviously the electronic manufacturers, I don't want to call out specific names on our chat today for obvious reasons.
Of course.
Many of those brands did a good job of removing you from the floor where you walked in, they had a little entryway area and you felt like you were removed from the exhibit floor. You felt like you kind of went into this little portal and you all of a sudden were morphed into this private showroom of only what they wanted you to see and experience. They dimmed the lights, there was ambient music and sound to kind of escape that the noise of the floor and the voices, and then to focus in on their products and then having those products segmented into spaces that made sense, like home goods all in one area so you could look at all those things. And then obviously showcasing their partnerships. A lot of these brands are partnered with sporting organizations and they provide sponsorships for these and showcasing those connections. Many of the brands had, NFL memorabilia in their spaces. I saw the World Cup Championship trophy in one of the partners that was set up at the show site. Many of those things were great that kind of pulled you in. And I think there were a lot of examples of brands that did a really good job of that. And then I feel like there was a few that did a good job of having this wow moment to get you in. And then as soon as you walked in, you were really let down because it was like there was nothing left, right? The sizzle was amazing. But then when you took that first bite, you were like, oh, that was so overpriced. So I think, again, there's a lot of opportunities. Again, I think that where it comes back in, right? Tell the story and the customer journey, right? You have to take it to the next step or you're going to end up leaving people feeling unfulfilled as well.
Yeah, and I would say a couple examples that I saw that I felt immersed were I was seeing quite a bit of people using, the space above, whether, if it was something with an arch, LED tiles, or also, if there's a structure that's a bit higher. I had to stop and look a couple of times. The backlit, what is the word I'm looking for? Fabric, what is that called? The backlit graphics. Some of the backlit graphics looked pretty incredible up high. And again, using height as that opportunity to feel like, you know what this brand is. Sometimes you're seeing it paired with LED walls. But I feel like if you're able to see from a distance what a brand is, and when you walk in and, in a way, feeling just like surrounded and immersed by whether that's like lighting, LED lighting, I would say was kind of everywhere, wrapped around booths, up in the ceiling or up in the hanging signs, around LED tiles, just kind of intertwined everywhere. And again, that's to help with, branding colors and also your eyes just being drawn to that booth. I feel like there were so many brands that did a really great job of using all the space that they had, and that even included the floor sometimes, being very intentional about that flooring matching the story, or using LED tiles. And yeah, you just walk in. If I'm able to say, like, I felt like I was in the middle of a cornfield in the farm at John Deere. Like they're a very identifiable brand. And when you walk in, I really did feel like, I was in their home in a way where just like everything, like I felt like I was just right there in a showroom or in the middle of a farm. And it just felt cool to be in there.
That's a great use of technology too, is when we start talking about some of the larger shows, especially as we get into some of the larger manufacturing shows or larger equipment shows, technology is going to play a big part in that because, again, one of the things that comes up in those shows is the cost for drayage and moving the large equipment and not being able to run it at all. And I've seen some of the videos from that John Deere booth of running that combine and actually using digital to show it actually like picking up the corn and then shooting it out the side, and that all being video. That was that was a pretty amazing job that was done. So I was pretty impressed by that application. And to me, from a design perspective, being one of the things that I really love about this industry and that has kept me sort of in it and on my toes for as long as it has, is that being able to be creative and watch it morph and change over the years. And I feel like in the last 3 to 4 years, the acceleration of what's been going on in terms of like LED technology and where that has gone. Just like you said, LED technology used to be like, oh, you want an LED wall? Well, let's talk about how much you have to invest. Now it's almost standardized, right? Like everyone's got an LED wall, and now they're integrated into walls and they're surrounded by backlit graphics, or they're becoming floors, right? That can be interactive. Or LED lighting in terms of like the edge lighting. Again, that you go back 3 years, that was something that was cutting edge, no pun intended, right? But now it's almost standardized, right? Because again, you can dial it in, you can have it change, you can have it chase itself. Those are some of the cool things that you can build into structure to kind of draw people's eye, and I absolutely love how that's kind of taken, I don't want to say taken the place, but really accentuated what you could do graphically, and allow you to change content, show to show, audience to audience, and not have to change. And it speaks to what Skyline can do too in terms of the modularity, because you can change the structure and change the message. And if you're doing it digitally, you don't really have to change much as long as you keep your messaging high level. So I find that really cool, as well as some of the things that we brought to the table.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to touch on as well in the when we talked about some of the trends that were great that I think we've hit on, and there were some that were not so great. There was one of the halls in particular kind of seemed to be a bit of a letdown, and that was more along the lines of the return of the build and burn this year, which is awfully surprising and to me awfully disappointing from a number of factors. Chris, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, we've been around for a little while, Brian, so we remember those days and the big shift in the industry about, sustainability and environmentally friendly and not giving away so much swag that just gets thrown away, and all these processes about recycling and, repurposing things. And I was really shocked this year that for the first time, I felt like it was 5, 6 years ago when it was back to the build and burn, just, cheapest options possible, cheapest materials and products that you can find, and throwing things in the dumpster after the show was over and just destroying it. In fact, I had many clients that people that we had interacted with that told us that, yeah, they're just going to throw their stuff away when the show's over. And that was very, very frowned upon for the last number of years in the industry, because it had been very much heavily focused on sustainability and environmental clauses. And I mean, many companies were wouldn't engage you unless you had a solid sustainability policy within your organizations. And I hope it was just a very, very small blimp and not a trend, because we all know how important that is to the environment and to just our industry as a whole and our reputation. So I hope that it's not a trend and it was just a bump, but it was definitely very prevalent this year for sure.
And noticeable from not only up close, but from afar. I was with you and 2 other professionals who have seen it all. And, immediately you guys could point out like, oh, that look at that build. You could just tell how it was put together, or that is very cheaply or fastly made. And then even looking up close, there were certain elements where you could just tell where they stuck them together with some double-sided tape, or things just weren't even finished or completed. Say they spent some time on like, this is going to be our theme, this window we're going to recreate, but even just up close, it was like falling apart. And it seemed to be happening more often than we would have liked to see at CES.
Yeah, I remember the one booth that I didn't even feel comfortable walking into because they had a wall at the beginning of the entrance and it was leaning at like, I swear it felt like a 30-degree angle because they had a monitor mounted on it and it wasn't properly counterbalanced and it didn't feel safe and secure. And you could see nobody was in that section of the booth. And it was a missed opportunity. Again, why spend all that time and energy and resources to get to that position and then to have that brand not show up correctly and have their people feel unsafe and not want to be in that area because it really looked like it was going to fall over at any moment. So yeah, there was a lot of that this year, unfortunately. Cords exposed on the rooftops, not being tucked in the walls. I saw a lot of graphics that were cut with like just extension cords pulled through them in the middle of the wall, like lots of gaff tape repairs that wasn't done very well. Just, the things that we all know goes on in our industry behind closed doors and up in the air where no one can see it, but not at eye level, 10 feet in front of you. Like there was a lot of that lack of quality. And I think, again, that plays into that lack of sustainability, that cheap materials, chasing lowest potential resources and throwing everything away at the end, because if you're not going to reuse it, what does it matter how it looks today? Because you're just going to throw it in the trash afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I just don't understand as far as the possible damage that could be done to the brand itself, right? Because if we're talking about it and as industry professionals, it had to be obvious to the people who were looking to engage with that company because it tells a story. And I always said this as someone, again, Chris, you talked about, companies that you do business with, right? Products that you do business with. You're looking at them and going, huh, this is how they feel about the people that they're engaging with. Like that's how I always sort of took offense when I saw this, is that this is how they feel about the end user, reinvesting in me as a consumer, or reinvesting in my business. This is how they felt about getting or re-engaging in my business. And this is how they put their brand forth and me associating with that brand. So I look at that and I go, is it worth the squeeze? Is it just worth the squeeze to maybe save a couple dollars, but then miss out on the leads that could possibly be come in? Because if you felt unsafe, imagine an attendee who's just walking by, who's going, there's no way I'm going in there, who doesn't know who this company is.
Yep. Yeah, I think I attributed a lot, Brian, this year. There was a lot of stepping over dollars to pick up pennies mindset in a sense, right? Like I noticed that what they don't factor in a lot of times is that it takes one mistake on show site, as we both know, and in this meeting, obviously we all know, to double what it cost you, because it costs a whole lot more to fix repairs and mistakes on show site than it does ahead of time. So it's better to be proactive, not reactive. And I think that it only takes one situation for a brand to really learn a hard lesson in that situation and spend double what they planned on because they didn't pay attention to the details or have a trusted partner that was looking out for those details for them.
Right. They end up having to panic on the show floor. And we all know panic costs dollars, lots of dollars on the show floor. When someone comes over, if there's a fire marshal or an engineer that comes over and says, you need to shore up that wall, and you've built it out of, sticks, you're off to Home Depot to try to figure out how to do that. I feel sorry for the carpenters that you've put in that situation, right? Yep. And I feel even more sorry for the brand and the detriment that you've done to it. But most of all, the disappointment in that, and I'm with you. I hope it is just a blip, because unfortunately, I've sort of seen it too in the RFPs that have been coming out towards the end of last year, and specifically the ones coming out for the beginning of this year, is that there used to be a whole section on sustainability. And I feel like that's sort of waning a little bit. Mm-hmm. Like it used to be, talk to me about what your carbon footprint is for your company, and what's your 5-year plan for reducing that, and talk to me about what your sustainability is. And now those questions aren't really being asked in those RFPs anymore. And again, we all know how important that is to not only the future of our industry, but the earth we walk on. So I'm hoping that isn't something that is going away completely. It's just temporary. One of the last things I wanted to touch on was just sort of the sort of the last things. If you were to give out any sort of major brand presence awards, and this one, I say we'd be okay to sort of throw out some names, because I think people who are doing it right sort of deserve their flowers. and people have no problem looking up on the internet and seeing who's doing it right. So again, we've already mentioned John Deere, and that video, if you haven't seen it, look it up. It's pretty amazing. Anyone's like, if you were to handing out like your best of show or your top two engagement, immersive quality awards, who would they go to? Andrea, let's start with you.
Oh boy. I need to just do a quick search on what the brand was.
Okay.
But I was specifically, I think my why I was drawn to it specifically was because I thought they did a really great job of content and product and mixed it together. I like to say, it was in a way taking a risk, but I feel like you're going to see this more commonly now, people mixing product with the technology, the content, the installations, activations, and one of the brands that did a really great job, they had a robo vacuum that they had mounted on top of an LED wall, and they created the content fully around that. The content, while this was static, the object was static, the content was shifting as if, like it bumped into the wall and then the content turned. And, I was very drawn into that. I thought they did a really creative way. You knew exactly what their product was. You knew exactly who they were. Sorry that it's slipping my mind at this moment.
That's okay. I know what you're talking about. I've seen that video too. That was very cool, and it's a very cool application when you talk about, again, when you talk about equipment or getting it to run or showcasing that. It's very hard to show all the different applications of a robo vacuum, of how that could work in different venues in different parts of your house without building a house on the show floor. So I love the fact that they did something and integrated it directly into an LED and used the surrounding to digitize it. That's very cool.
Yes, and that brand, it was Eureka. Eureka, they did a really great job of using
Very
their product and LED wall and content all in combination to give a really strong presence of who they are and what their product is. And again, I was drawn into it, and I couldn't stop watching it. And I was like, Chris, grab this, or Chris, come over here, take a look. Megan, that was, for me, just that use was very cool.
That's when you've hit a home run, when you start calling your friends over to come take a look at an installation or something that's going on inside an exhibit, when it doesn't just impress you, but you have to tell your friends. That's definitely, you definitely know you're doing a good job.
And I think it's something that, for me, I was looking for examples, like how can we help our clients and give them an example of how to use it? When they say we want something really cool, we want a showstopper, we want LED, do you have content? And the question, it stops there of like, do we, yes or no? Do we have time and budget to create that? And then if they're willing to, create something really cool, I think having examples that are obtainable or for them to have a goal to look towards, that is a showstopper. So trying to find, for me, a really cool way to use a simple LED wall, but how can we make it different? So that's why it stood out.
That's a great example. Chris, what about you?
I would say there were three that really stood out to me. And Andrea, you spoke to one of the ones that I was going to call out because I think that it was one of the best use cases of integrating content with an actual physical structure. And Eureka did a great job with that. In fact, a lot of the other robot vacuum companies all had the exact same concept. It was, displays with the machine in action. This took a different approach to where you could see it from 20 feet away because it was up in the air. Whereas with the other ones, you couldn't see them unless you were standing inside the little area and there was tons of people around it, which made it difficult. So I would definitely say that was one of the ones that stood out to me. I think my favorite one of the entire show was the Segway display. I think they showed up very, very on brand. They had a journey. They had all their products on display. They had a giant e-bike in the corner that was like the size of a diesel truck. It was huge. Wow. It was probably had to be at least 10 feet tall. Like the tires were massive. And it was really, really interesting the way that they just tied their brand in. I think that they did a good job. There was every detail from the way the flooring was done that tied into their map and their layout of their exhibit was just done to excellency. So I think that, in my opinion, they showed up, they had the best integration of their products and the experience and the journey, and they did a great job. Another standout for me was Govee. I think they had a display that was just incredible. They integrated their products into the display itself, probably better than anyone on show site, in all honesty. And they have a broad reaching usage of lighting and different things we all know. They had little soffits set up. They had, interior lighting set up. They just did a really good job. Even the logo, as you walked up into the entrance, was lit up with their products and just stood out in a sea of kind of everybody else doing the same thing. So I think it was just, those were kind of my three standouts. Obviously, all the big fish show up with their beautiful exhibits, and it's harder to impress when you're used to seeing that. These were some of the big standouts that you don't normally see on the show floor every year, which was why they were top of mind.
I always love to see that, right? There's things you expect from the Samsungs and the Sonys, right? When they come in and they're spending $5, $10, $15 million, and you expect to be impressed. Not that there's anything wrong with spending that amount of money, and they do put their best foot forward. But when you see someone actually adhere to the things we're talking about, right? Running a red thread through their theme, through the attendee journey, integrating technology with their physical product, telling a story, and then having good booth engagement opportunities. It's those are the type of things where you stand out and you go, you're doing it right. Those are the type of companies that deserve their flowers for sure. Mm-hmm. Well, we're kind of wrapping up here, so I just wanted to say thank you very much for joining me. A couple of key takeaways that I have written down here, and feel free to add on to this. One of the things that we kind of captured from the conversation is that exhibitors should really prioritize experience, right? It's not just about technology. It's not just about the structure. You have to really decide on what your show's wow moment is going to be and let that red thread run through the experience. You have to add interactive elements to encourage participation. Right? Make sure that the attendee gets a chance to actually engage with something, whether it be your product or whether it be with technology inside your booth. Being able to add a modern edge, that technology can also be something that tells your story. So it can change, again, show to show, audience to audience, day to day, even having accent lighting that can change, morph, chase throughout the booth to draw eyes and give the booth some additional personality. Having a cohesive theme. Andrea talked about getting lost inside a booth and not quite sure if the booth was even the same booth when she was in there. Having a very cohesive message, cohesive theme, being immersed inside a brand. But then also technology not being a gimmick, right? It's technology for technology's sake is useless. Making sure that content remains king. Those are the things that kind of stood out to me. Anything that you guys want to add as we sort of sign off here?
I would just say, Brian, work with a trusted partner that knows what you're trying to accomplish, right? That knows the industry, that knows the show floor, that knows what other people are doing, because we have visibility into many things that a lot of these attendees don't. We know how many people are doing the same thing over and over again. For example, the robot vacuums, right? Like, we've seen that a million times. And I think that's why Eureka stood out so much, because they did something different that no one else did on the show floor. So that's where having a partner like Skyline is going to come in to help you and to help you stand out on the show floor.
Great point, Chris. Andrea?
Yeah. One thing I wanted to add, it was really fun for me to go for my first experience. It was also really fun to have Megan there. She was also on our team joining there because she's someone who wants to jump in, dive in, and be a part of the experience. She'll see that there's a demo happening that you can be a part of. And so she and I kind of joined in on some of that. And, there are certain brands, there are certain booths, certain shows that will call for that. And, you do want to have the right experience. You don't want to have an experience that's not going to be memorable, that people aren't engaging with, or something that just doesn't make sense, or something that you're going to spend an astronomical amount of money on and not have enough return on. So just really thinking through what those experiences are. And so it was, again, really fun for me to do that. We got our hair done with, there was a hair blow dryer. They had salon stylists, talking us through.
Chris, you didn't have that done?
I didn't have anything they wanted to work with there. I was lacking follicle things for them to play with, so didn't work out for me, unfortunately. I watched from a distance, though.
Yes.
Right, and we even we did it was an activation for a movie that's coming out, actually, but we got to be part of the experience, and we had to try to find ourselves not guilty. It's you were guilty before, or you were guilty going
Mercy.
into it. We
Mercy
had
is
to
the movie. Mercy, right?
Mercy is the movie, yes.
Yes.
So we
Yes.
had to
I'm
prove
looking
that we
forward to seeing
were
it.
not, yeah, we had like 30 or maybe it was like a minute or 2 minutes to be able to answer some questions. Again, we were just very much immersed in there. And it was memorable. It was fun for us to engage in that. But again, it has to be the right activation for the brand, for people to want to engage in. And like I said, like the booth staff training on what your activation is, that was huge. I saw a lot of different activations that I was drawn towards, and then no one engaged me, and then I got nothing from it. I went in not knowing anything, and I left not knowing anything. So again, you really have to invest in all those areas. There's a lot of really important areas just to make an impression. So yeah, that's kind of my biggest takeaway. The ones that left an impression did for a reason, and you could tell that they put not only effort, money in, but they cared about having people leave knowing something and taking something away.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you both for joining me. This has been an amazing time. I love hanging out with both of you, both on and off the air. You could find this podcast as well as copies of our blogs now on audio on our website as well as on our YouTube channel. So please subscribe, go on, check us out. More to come. We're going to do several more of these throughout the year based on different topics and different subjects. Looking forward to coming back to you. For Andrea Murphy and Chris Takas, I'm Brian Lanning, and this has been Beyond the Booth, brought to you by Skyline Exhibits.